Hey, common grounders, friends, and others that might be looking in. I'm not sure about you, but it seems to me that over the last week or so, tensions in our context have seemed to be rising around a number of issues in the context of this lockdown and COVID craziness that we all find ourselves in. Social media seems to be heating up. I've heard of some pastors that are petitioning the government to let churches gather. Business forums are sharing divergent views, sometimes very strongly. Families are grappling also quite strongly at times with whether or not kids should be going back to school as the government has announced. And I think that right at the outset, I think it's really important for all of us to recognize that these are not just complicated matters. See, complicated matters are matters that you just take your time with, but you can eventually kind of figure out and you get to the perfect sum. It's like something like a math sum where you know it's going to take some time and you can figure it all out and then you get to the perfect right answer. Those are complicated matters. But what we're living in today is not complicated matters. We're living in complex matters, which we may never ever fully be able to resolve. For many of us, we'll never know exactly what the right approach should have been when it comes to these COVID realities. There are likely multiple right answers and multiple wrong answers, which can at different times get switched around or even change in this ever-changing season that we're going through. But here is the key, if you ask me. I think that being willing to acknowledge that these are complex matters allows us to determine the right posture and also the right process for getting through all of this as we would believe Christ would want us to get through. So I want to take a few minutes today to answer a question for us as Christ followers, and that is, what is the Christian response to issues of choice that tend to divide us as followers of Jesus? Because I think we can all agree that these realities that we're living in, it doesn't just provide problems to solve, but it rather has provided a number of tensions that we have to hold and manage. And I believe as the people of God, as we're looking to live as Christ would have us live and show something of His love and His compassion to others in this season, I think we need to freshly invite the Spirit to guide us through. He's known as the Spirit of revelation, the Spirit of truth, the Spirit of knowledge, and He is on hand to guide us through. Also, as I've reflected, it seems that most people are feeling these tensions starting to boil within their own lives for a few different reasons. Some of them starting to boil over in their perspectives and their posts online and actions that they are taking in their own lives. I think it's one of three F's. See, I'm a preacher. I'm going to give you three F's this morning. Firstly, fear. I think people are being driven by fear. Secondly, people are being driven by frustration. And thirdly, people are driven by FOMO. These are underlying motivations that seem to cause people to act differently in these times. Fear of losing a job or a business or a loved one. Fear of the unknown, of what the future holds. That's fear. Frustrations about other people's actions, other people's decisions, the senseless regulations that seem to be in place at times. These are frustrations that are causing people to act differently in this time. And then also, obviously, FOMO, the fear of missing out, about not being able to live out our desired freedoms and see who we want to see and live our best life nows. Like that's a reality for lots of us, that FOMO dynamic, right? This week, I read a great article by a friend of ours, Brett McCracken. He's an elder in one of our partner advanced churches, and he's also a senior editor at the Gospel Coalition. And the article is called Church, Don't Let the Coronavirus Divide You. And I would really encourage you to check it out. It's trending as the most read article on the Gospel Coalition site right now. But in this article, Brett points out that there are so many diverse perspectives and conversations happening at the moment, and he looks to what does it mean for us to wisely re-enter the social space, and how that conversation alone has the ability to really divide God's people in this time. I'd imagine that here in South Africa, I think the polarizing opinions on how we open up the economy again and how we return to school and if it's okay to see some close friends and family members at times already, those conversations are all underway and different people have got very polarized opinions on these things, or polarizing opinions on these things. But what I love about Brett's article is that he actually speaks about some of the opportunities that this moment creates for us as Christians. And it reminds us of some of those biblical Christ-like characteristics that we are called to display in every season, but especially in seasons like this. And he, in the article, goes on to suggest 4 countercultural opportunities that I would love us to invite the Spirit to empower us in at this time. Countercultural sacrifice, countercultural humility, countercultural patience, and countercultural nuance. 4 really important things that you and I, brothers and sisters, followers of Christ, can exercise at this time in representing Jesus to our world. Let's unpack those real quick. Countercultural sacrifice. We know what this is about. This is about being people who are willing to put the lives of others ahead of ourselves, just as Jesus did. At a time when so many are kind of swinging and fighting out of their corner out of fear or frustration or FOMO, I believe that we, as the people of God, are called to be empowered by the Spirit to live in this different way, to model love to the world at this time. Yes, it's true. And I'll give it to you. You may think some of these precautions are a needless overreaction. But here's the thing. Even if it turns out that you're right, can you not sacrifice your ideals for a season out of love for others who believe that these precautions are necessary and put in place for a reason? I believe that as Christians, we should strive to honor people on both sides of some of these spectrums. And I do agree with Brett and his article where he says that little is more Christian than our Romans 12:1 posture of sacrifice in these hard times. It's that posture of sacrifice that has marked the church throughout the ages and throughout different moments of these kinds of pandemics hitting the world. The church is known for a posture of sacrifice. And let's not be any different in this time, in this COVID day. I think we can actually embrace it with gladness. The second part then is countercultural humility. This speaks against the very large proliferation of experts that I think we're seeing in our world today. Don't you see them? They're all there on social medias, and every leader is becoming an expert on all kinds of things. And even just chatting to some of my buddies, everybody's got strong opinions around what everybody should be doing at this time. And I would love to suggest that we are called as Christ followers to have a countercultural humility. I think we can lead the way on this as the church, the people of God. Let's listen and learn and even lead with great measures of humility. See, the danger, I think, can be that you may end up winning some discussion battles, but you might, if you don't have humility, lose the war of people appreciating your character. Unless you can find that you operate out of a Christ-like humility. So let's follow the advice of James. James 1 verse 19, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Let's exercise this kind of humility. What about countercultural patience? I just love the way in this article, Brett points out how patience is one of the rarest virtues in today's insta-everything world. And he says, and yet this is another way that we as the people of God can be empowered by the Spirit to live differently at this time. This week, Kate and I, we've had to coach our kids on patience and what it means for us to dig deep. No, you can't go and see your friends at this time. What does it mean to dig deep at this time? And the cool part for us is that we were able to point out that we as Christians have got lots more to dig deep into. We have the very resources of heaven at our disposal. We have the Spirit, the living God on hand to comfort us and guide us through. And remember, get some perspective in this moment, that in the greater scheme of things of eternity, whether it's months long or years long, this whole pandemic will be but a blip on the radar of eternity. So we can exercise as the people of God some patience in this time. And then lastly, countercultural nuance. Unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more good people lose their nuance as the pressures seem to be dialing up and building up. When those fears and frustrations and FOMOs grow larger, what happens is people seem to start swinging harder. And I'm not sure how you're affected by that, but for me as a fellow Christ follower, I find myself stepping further back from those kinds of people and wanting to be associated with the gloves-on Christians at this time. These, I don't believe, are the hills that we should be dying on. We have much bigger fights to fight. Brett, in his article, again, he points out that we live in an unnuanced age. The economic model of the media, built on clicks and views, it works against nuance. Advertisers know that nuance doesn't sell. Politicians know that nuance doesn't sell. We shouldn't be surprised by how rare it is for someone to hold humble, complicated, both and views in today's hyper-partisan media chastised world. Brett, I think, has served us with a fresh perspective on that and reminding us of that. This isn't us, church. Christ followers, we are not called to be those blunt kind of chargers. We're called to hold the nuance of what does grace and truth look like. We are called to live counterculturally in this time. And I believe nuance only really results when humility and patience seem to come together. Humility and patience come together. And don't you think that if we as a church are going to emerge out of this crisis, come out on the other side with our unity and fellowship kind of intact and kind of whole and good, we're going to need to embrace some of this countercultural path of nuance that Christ calls us to. Brett says again in the article, he says, it means we can be skeptical of some aspects of the lockdown without resorting to outrageous conspiracy theories. And we can honor governing authorities, just like Romans 13 tells us to do, while engaging them in some pushback, civil pushback when necessary. But let me suggest that in our case, I'm not sure that our needs are our rights to surf or our rights to run at a certain time. Even though I don't personally understand why those rules are in place, I'm just not sure those are the battles that we need to fight. Those are the things we need to push back on. We need to be a people of countercultural sacrifice, humility, patience, and nuance. These are things that Jesus calls us to. And I think that the Spirit wants to empower us and strengthen us and guide us to be this kind of countercultural people. So let me bring this little charge into land by reading some great verses out of Ephesians chapter 4. The kind of people we want to be. We want to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Brother and sister, we're not called to be an echo of society at this time. We are called to be a non-anxious presence. And in this week, right here between Ascension and Pentecost, as we remember the mandate, the Great Commission that we have been given as Christ followers, and as we freshly invite the Spirit to come upon us as a church, let's ask the Spirit to provide us with the wisdom and the strength to live out these matters with grace. God bless you. I hope that some of my grapplings are helpful to you as we all together look to God, as we try our best to find His strength through these times, truly unprecedented times. And somehow, hopefully, you and I both can become a little bit more like Jesus in this process too, right? Cheers, everyone. Bless you.